Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Gone Racing. Jeff Motley here with you in the South Point Hotel, Casino, and Spa Studios. But I'm joined this week, not by my usual companion, Brendan Gone, but Jeff Parles. Jeff is no stranger around the South Point here. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Double Jeff.
The Jeff and Jeff show.
There we go.
Jeff squared.
It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to breaking down what's coming up this weekend in Nashville.
Well, we're glad to have you with us, and we had a great week last week at Charlotte. First off, Brendan, if you guys wondering where he is, he's underwater somewhere. He's doing like some scuba diving lesson because, a lot of times we do this show, and if you're watching us on YouTube, you know that one of us will go through Zoom or what. I guess they got rid of that. What's that other thing used to be where you could do the video conferencing? Skype? Yeah, Skype no longer exists, so it's like Zoom or whatever. But this time he said, I'm going to be underwater, and I don't believe my laptop will work very well underwater. So, therefore, Jeff is in this week, and we're excited.
I thought you were making fun of his picks, but he had a good week last week.
He had a good week, but I made sure to point out to him that it wasn't quite as good as my week was last week. He actually texted me when the race was over, and he said, I got 3 right. And I texted him back, and I said, I got 4. And I said on the show last week that I really thought about doing 5 picks all against Kyle Larson. As much as I like Kyle Larson, I just thought the whole Indy to Charlotte thing, well, if I'd done the 5 picks against Kyle Larson, I would have won all 5 of them. And I made sure that I pointed that out.
You're having a heck of a year so far, Mr.
Yeah,
Motley.
so far, definitely having a good year. And Charlotte, and the 600, because there's so many variables that can take place when you're doing the Coke 600, betting on that race. I mean, it's not quite as crazy as betting on Daytona or Talladega where, one wreck could take out 20 or 25 guys. But when you've got to deal with 600 miles of racing, there's a lot of things that can go wrong there.
For sure. The longest race on the car. And look, last week you had just something we've never seen before happen.
Yeah, you're right. It was actually, I think, to me, it was somewhat shocking. Ross Chastain got the win, his first win of the season. In fact, it's interesting here. He's a guy who's already won at Nashville before in his career, so where we're going this week. So certainly a guy that's going to feel like he's on a roll. But here's a guy who had to start dead last on the field, something that's never happened in the Coca-Cola 600. Now, we've had drivers in NASCAR have to start last because they received a penalty after qualifying. So officially, NASCAR would credit you with wherever you qualified, even though you may have had to start at the rear because you changed engines or made an unapproved adjustment. In fact, Kyle Busch did that in Las Vegas back in 2009, where I think he won the pole and had to start dead last because he had to make a change. But Ross Chastain, it was an amazing run for Ross Chastain to come all the way from the back and win that race. And it was a race, really, I think everyone thought, gosh, William Byron has got this race. I mean, Byron led 283 out of 400 laps. He won every stage except the one that counted. So if you had William Byron, you were feeling pretty good about yourself.
Cold world, right? You lead almost 75% of that behemoth of a race. You don't come away with the victory. Again, Byron has really had a tremendous year to begin with anyway, but what a win for Chastain coming all the way from the back. And obviously last week, Kyle Larson attempted to do the whole race in Indianapolis at the 500, and then attempted to do the whole race in Charlotte. Obviously did not finish in Indianapolis in what was a wreck-filled 500. And then
before they even started, it started getting wrecked.
Well, I mean, yeah, when you have a wreck during the pace lap, that's always a sign of things to come. And it was a wreck-filled 500 at the Brickyard, but Larson also wrecked in Charlotte and finished near the back of the field as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's been a lot of talk about the double at Charlotte, and we've seen a number of drivers who have completed the double. We've seen John Andretti, we saw Tony Stewart, Robbie Gordon, Kurt Busch. I mean, different drivers who have done that double. It's been a pretty frustrating couple of years, I think, for Kyle Larson. It all really kind of seems to start with the weather. The weather in Indianapolis has certainly been a negative factor each of the last 2 years. We were delayed getting started this year. And then you made a good point. We had a crash. Scott McLaughlin wrecked before the race ever even started. So that delayed the start even more. And even though Kyle Larson ended up crashing out of the Indy 500, I don't think there was any way he was going to be able to finish that race anyway. And, Indianapolis has a rule, unlike NASCAR. So NASCAR, the rules are different with the 2 series. In NASCAR, if you start the race, you get the points, but you can have a relief driver during the course of the race. IndyCar, it's the same way. Whoever starts the car gets credit, but whoever starts the car has to finish the car. You're not allowed to bring in a driver once the race starts. And they had Tony Kanaan on standby, and Tony was ready to go, but Tony could only get in that car at the start of the race. Once it started, it was Larson's or park it.
The Fox broadcast did the interview with Kanaan during that rain delay. It was fascinating, again, for someone like me who's a little more of an outsider. Didn't realize that in the IndyCar, that if Larson takes the green flag, you go from there, and that's that. Didn't make, like we said, didn't make it to the checkered at the end, but again, not less than usual made it to the end in Indianapolis last week.
Right, and his whole goal of running 1,100 miles and unfortunately didn't get the 500 in at Indy or all 600 in at Charlotte either. And Larson was the favorite pretty much everywhere. He was the favorite to win.
Yeah.
He was the favorite, obviously, in his group. He was a favorite in about 6 different head-to-heads. So it did not work out. But, go ahead.
Oh, in retrospect, and you were talking about this before the show also, that was probably the one time all year where you wanted to actually fade Kyle Larson, where you're traveling midday. It was tight getting to Charlotte as it was, especially with the late start, even with wrecking in Indianapolis. Maybe a little bit of a different theme this week now in a regular week for Kyle Larson heading to Nashville.
No question. And look, I think racing is like every other sport in that you have to be in the right frame of mind.
Of course.
And let's think about where Kyle Larson's frame of mind was. First off, he's been shuttling back and forth for days and weeks between Indianapolis and Charlotte, trying to concentrate on 2 different race cars. The frustration of sitting there watching it rain while you're in the car, seeing it delayed. The frustration of coming to one to go and then realizing a guy has crashed to further delay the start of the race, then crashing out of the race. I mean, that's frustrating. And so then you're sitting on a plane and you arrive about 15 minutes before driver intros in Charlotte. I just don't know where your head is. Now, granted, he was fortunate that he qualified up front and he was leading early on, and he certainly spun out, which kind of got him behind the 8 ball. And then he was actually in a crash that was not of his own making. But I agree with you. I think if you're not in the right frame of mind, that's gonna be a struggle. But somebody who was in the right frame of mind, and we talked about, was Ross Chastain, and we had to let everybody know how he really cashed in for the bettors this week. He was 25-1, one of the longer shots we've had all year to win a race. 25-1, not quite where Josh Berry was when he won in Las Vegas, but still a great odd. He was top 3. He was plus 600. He won his group at plus 230. That was Group C, and he also delivered a win for Chevy, which was plus 120. Chevy was the favorite in terms of the manufacturers. And take a look at the top 10. Outside of that, we talked about William Byron, what a great run he had. He was a plus 235 for a top 10. And then Chase Briscoe, it's a guy that Brendan and I talked a lot about last week. He won the pole. He got a penalty speeding in the pits during the race and worked his way all the way back up into a top 3. He was 10-1 for a top 3. And I'll tell you, that was a great number to have on Chase Briscoe for a top 3. But looking at some of the other top 10s, talking about guys that needed good runs, AJ Allmendinger, that came out of nowhere.
Well, that was going to say, that would have been another good price on the top 3 of Allmendinger.
Well, and DraftKings offers some top 5s and some top 10s. So AJ Allmendinger, a great run. Brad Keselowski, who had some problems during the race, but is a guy who's run well to Coke 600, got a much needed top 5. Chase Elliott 6, not really a big surprise there. Michael McDowell, super run for Michael McDowell, finishing in 7th. Christopher Bell, a guy who's had his issues on the 1.5 mile tracks, the intermediate tracks this year. A decent run for him. Ryan Preece just keeps clicking off top 10s, and maybe one of the bigger surprises there, Noah Gragson getting in a top 10 spot there. We've seen Noah every week running top 15, now creeping into the top 10. So there's a lot of big names, but there's some not as household names up there in the top 10.
Well, and you mentioned Allmendinger, much needed top 10 for him. Keselowski's had a really just a miserable start to the year. That was his first top 10. Forget top 5. That was his first top 10 of the year. Great to see. And he started from the back as well. Started 35th, ends up 5th in this race. And look, you get a nice 25-1 shot. Honestly, a little bit surprised with Chastain starting at the back that he wasn't a little bit longer. Especially knowing with the quality at the front. And again, Byron was the best car for the majority of this race, just couldn't finish the job off. And again, if you had Chastain at 25-1, that's a nice little Memorial Day weekend payoff.
Yeah, and I think part of it, Chastain did a really good job of working with the lap traffic, which I think really kind of helped him helped him get there. All right, let's take a quick look at our current standings right now. The one guy who we've seen make a big jump up right now is Chris Buescher, because he got 30 of his 60 points back. So he's now only 6 points behind the cut line. Ryan Preece has gotten himself above the cut line along with Ricky Stenhouse. Allmendinger has gotten very close. He's only 13 points out of the cut line. Kyle Busch, another guy that's below the cut line. And looking at our next few races coming up, we talked about this weekend, we're at Nashville Super Speedway. Then we go to Michigan Speedway, big 2-mile sweeping track there. Then we make the first trip ever to the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City. This is going to be the first points race in the modern era outside of the United States. Now, the Xfinity Series, the Truck Series, they've raced in Mexico, they've raced in Canada. This is going to be phenomenal to see this course here. And then we have Pocono, and then we make our second trip back of the year to Atlanta Motor Speedway. So nice diversity there.
Oh, I would say so, especially like you said, first ever international race. And I mean, it's a shorter mileage race as well in comparison to everything else on the NASCAR card this year as well. So,
well, I think one of the interesting things we're going to have really with Mexico City, I think the race itself is going to be interesting, but I think it's also going to be a little bit of a challenge for the teams.
Agreed.
You know, you got border crossings. Mexico City is not close. I mean, people think it's in Mexico, but once you cross the Rio Grande, or I guess you cross the Rio Grande to get there, it's a long way. You know, one time I took a road trip. One time I was like right out of college and went to visit a friend of mine who lived in Bangor, Maine.
Okay.
And we were driving and we crossed into Maine, and I thought, well, we're in Maine, and the next sign said
Not
Bangor,
quite.
185 miles. I think that's the way these hauler drivers are going to feel once they cross into Mexico. They're going to get in there and they're going to be like, oh, we're here. Oh, no, we're not
we got
here.
another few hours to go.
No, we got a long way to go, but a lot of diversity coming up on our schedule between the mile and a third and Michigan and then going to some of the bigger tracks. So we come back on Gone Racing. Jeff and I are going to start talking about everything Nashville, how drivers have done, and then we'll start getting to our odds to win. Welcome back to the show we're calling the Jeff and Jeff Show this week. Jeff Motley along with Jeff Parles. Brendan is off this week. He's on a scuba diving expedition, and as he so eloquently said, his laptop doesn't work underwater, so no zooming in this week. So well, we also don't have him zipping around here on his little scooter where he hurt his ankle. So he's got a cute little scooter with little pink ribbons hanging off the end of it.
So that was didn't go all the way though, correct? Not a full full collapse.
But I don't think his doctor was real happy with the fact that he was going to be doing this underwater diving apparatus situation. But hey, hopefully he will come back and he will still be on at least one leg and
one piece
in one piece,
as much of one piece as he can be.
Yeah, exactly. So, but this weekend we are headed off to Nashville Super Speedway. Yeah. It's only the 5th Cup Series race that's been contested at Nashville, the Cracker Barrel 400. You know, I used to love Cracker Barrel when I lived back there on the South. I don't know if you've ever visited Cracker Barrel, but
I lived in Missouri for 7 years.
You know, not good for my waistline, but I enjoyed
Cracker
the food
Barrel.
there.
Plenty of other great breakfast joints, but yeah, love those Cracker Barrel pancakes.
Yes. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people eating at the Cracker Barrel in Nashville this week. But we're looking at how guys have done. We've got 4 drivers that have all posted wins there. Kyle Larson, Ross Chastain, Joey Logano, Chase Elliott, they have wins. Kyle Larson and Ross Chastain have finished in the top 5 in 3 of the 4 races, and Kyle Larson has got a top 10 in all 4 races at Nashville. So you kind of talked about the resetting after Indianapolis. This probably could not be a better track for him to be going to.
No, I mean, you get a place where you said he won the inaugural race in 2021 when NASCAR went back, top 10 in all of them. This has really been, Jeff, wouldn't you say this has been a heavy hitters course so far with who's come out on top? I mean, you just mentioned it, Larson in 21, Elliott in 22, Chastain 2 years ago, and Logano last year. You're getting your heavy hitters to win at this race. And for Larson, and look, we'll get to our picks later, but I have a feeling that we'll be a little more active on taking Kyle Larson this week as opposed to last week where we mentioned in the Open. That is a very difficult feat that very few have been able to actually pull off. You're now not having to race two different cars in two different cities in the same day. And now you're going to a spot where Larson, as you said, has been unbelievably successful. And there's a good reason he's the betting favorite to win this week.
Well, and I do believe that the cream rises when you get to certain tracks like that. And I definitely believe that's what we've seen. And if anybody remembers last year may have been one of the craziest NASCAR races in history at any racetrack. 5 overtime restarts for Joey Logano to eventually pull that race off. So it was it was quite a calamity of errors down the stretch, but Joey Logano did prevail.
331 laps when it was all said and done.
And then it was not advertised to be 331 laps. Nowhere close to it. So, all right, let's take a look at our odds for this week. No big surprise that Kyle Larson comes in as our favorite at plus 500. Then Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, William Byron are all plus 600. Ryan Blaney is plus 800. Tyler Reddick 10-1. Ross Chastain 14-1. Chase Elliott is 20-1. Joey Logano and Chase Briscoe 25, and then a bunch of guys at 30. Ty Gibbs, Josh Berry, Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski, Alex Bowman, and Kyle Busch all at 30-1. Do you see any value in there?
So I'm just going to go to the top here with Kyle Larson. Just going back to what you said. Top 10 in all of the races here, top 5 in 3 of them. Won the initial race a few years, 2021 at this track. And last week was so abnormal that this week is going to, at least to me, I would imagine to say this week is going to feel like the most normal week of all time after running around like crazy, having, again, car to car, track to track, city to city multiple times last week. At 5-1, I actually thought we expected them to be a little bit shorter. I expected maybe a plus 350, a 4-1. I know we don't get much shorter than 5-1 in any of these races, but wouldn't have shocked me if that was the case. And then the other one, we just went through it. This is a heavy hitters course since NASCAR came back in 2021. And yeah, Joey Logano won this race in absurd fashion a year ago, but you see the defending champ at 25-1. That I think at least is worth a look here. Pizza money, smaller bet if you're going to take that 25-1. But those would be the two. Again, chalk with Larson. Logano is a longer shot as a small money bet potentially.
Well, I really like where you're going on Kyle Larson. You know, a lot of these drivers, and this is only applies for Kyle Larson this week, but a lot of drivers early in the season, you know, Daytona is such a crazy deal. You know, they're in Daytona for like a whole week and they got to run the duels and they got all this going on at Daytona. And a lot of times teams are like, man, I can't wait to get to the next race after Daytona. It's just like a load off of them and taking a big deep breath. And I think that's the way Kyle Larson's going to be feeling this week because the whole month of May has been quite a blur for Kyle, and now for the rest of this season, his number one focus can be on this Cup car. So I agree with you at plus 500. Joey Logano, 25-1, definitely a good line there on a guy like that. But I tell you, one of the things that, and Brendan and I like to talk about this a lot, is we are firm believers in Uncle momentum. Ross Chastain, you know, we talked about the success that Kyle Larson has had at Nashville. Ross Chastain won here a couple years ago. In fact, I think it may have been the first Cup race back, I believe. First Cup race that we raced at Nashville. I should know that because I was there when Chastain won the race, by the way. But I think a guy like Ross Chastain coming off a win last week, coming in at 14-1, and he's got remember we said he's got 3 top 5s and 4 starts here. So I like both of those guys. I'm totally with you on Larson, and I do like where Ross Chastain is there. All right, looking at our longer odds for this week's race, Ryan Preece and Carson Hocevar are 40-1. Hocevar, another guy, had a great run at Charlotte until he had some issues and he blew up. Bubba Wallace, Austin Cindric are 60-1, and then we got much longer odds here. Corey Heim running a rare Cup race for him. Eric Jones, Noah Gragson, Daniel Suarez, and AJ Allmendinger all 100-1. Michael McDowell, Justin Haley, Zane Smith, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 200-1. Austin Dillon and Todd Gilliland are 300-1. And then 20-1 is the field, but there's not a lot of guys in the field. Just looking off right now, I think there's a Ty Dillon, Shane Van Gisbergen, Cole Custer. There's not many guys in the field. These odds are from the South Point, so the field bet is probably not worth going after.
A rare non road track for Van Gisbergen as well in that field. Hocevar is the interesting one for me. He's been super unlucky this year. He really had a good car. Just last week, like you said, and ran a good race, then wrecked. Wish we were getting about 60-1 where Bubba Wallace and Austin Cindric are on Hocevar, but that would be the one on this sheet that makes sense. I know Zane Smith has had a nice start to the year as well. 200-1 is always a juicy price, but I expect a little bit of him coming back to earth sooner rather than later. But of these longer shots, Hocevar would be the only one I would even potentially look at here.
Well, and I think a lot of times when we look at the longer odds to win, I think we start getting interested more once we get to the top threes, because a lot of these guys that are longer odds to win, yes, they could pull it off. But I think once you get to top threes, I think that's where some of these guys may have a better option. So let's take a look at our top threes right now. Kyle Larson is plus 130. Denny Hamlin is plus 160. Christopher Bell plus 180. William Byron 200. Ryan Blaney 250. Tyler Reddick 275. Ross Chastain 350. 350. And he's got 3 top fives and 4 starts here. Chase Elliott, 400. Chase Briscoe is 600. Chris Buescher and Brad Keselowski at 700. Ty Gibbs, Kyle Busch, Josh Berry, all at 800. Alex Bowman is 850. And the guy you just talked about, Carson Hocevar, there at 10-1.
Going back to Larson again, I mean, you're getting a plus price in the top 3 in the track that he has been absolutely brilliant at. And again, just go back to what I said with the outrights market. Having the normal week is going to mean so much. And then look, Larson's been the best car in NASCAR this year on top of it. It just last week was so darn abnormal for him that, look, it was bound to happen. And was smart to fade him a week ago. Plus 130 is good. You mentioned Chastain. Like you've said, Chastain has been another guy who's been great at this course as well. And, you know, I will ask you this. When you have tracks that have a limited sample size like this one, again, this is only the 5th race for all these guys at this track, Jeff, you have to put a lot more into that as opposed to when you have like Talladega and Daytona and Charlotte, when you have dozens upon dozens of races at this point for all these guys. So, yeah, I would look to Chastain, look to Larson and Hocevar, like I said. 10-1. Wish I was getting a little bit more than that, but again, as a flyer, it's not a bad play there.
Yeah, and if you're watching us on the YouTube channel, a couple of them that actually are cut off on our list here. Joey Logano is a plus 600 for a top 3, and Ryan Preece is 11-1. So didn't mention those guys. Ryan Preece, a guy, like I said, he keeps hanging around the top 10 every week. But Joey Logano, 3 top 10s and 4 starts here at Nashville, and you're getting a plus 600 on Joey Logano. So that's a pretty good number there too as well. All right, let's look at some of our longer shots for top 3s. Bubba Wallace, Austin Cindric are 14-1. Daniel Suarez, Corey Heim at 20-1. AJ Allmendinger, Zane Smith, Noah Gragson at 45. Eric Jones is 40-1. Austin Dillon and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at 50. Justin Haley 60. Todd Gilliland 70. John Hunter Nemechek 80. And then Cole Custer, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Riley Herbst all 150-1. Is this where you say, whoa, Bubba Wallace top 3, 14-1? I'm just,
Well, you just missed an Allmendinger a week ago. It would be a hard sell for me to get him back into that area Cody was in last week in Charlotte. I go back to Zane Smith again, but at some point he's going to have regression. I would probably pass on all these on this one on this sheet. Maybe a small bet on Wallace or Cindric, but again, I'd rather have Hocevar 10-1 and just go a little bit heavier on him as opposed to taking a shot on one of these longer ones.
One thing about Nashville, it's we talk about how like I said, we talked about how that cream rises and we see these guys, but sometimes when you also get a racetrack like this, you don't necessarily get an upset winner.
Sure.
But these are the kind of tracks where you could have an upset with somebody having a stronger run maybe than you anticipated. Like I look at a guy like Austin Cindric and I think, well, shoot, he races for Penske, right? Logano has got 3 top 10s and 4 starts here. Blaney is a guy you would expect to run a little bit better than what we've seen out of Blaney here. And Josh Berry's getting better and better at these type racetracks. I know it's not a mile and a half. It's more like a little more. It's like between a mile and a half and a mile. It's like a mile and a third. So I don't know. I see a guy like Cindric could be an upset. So, it would be Wallace and Cindric. I wouldn't go much further down the list than that on that last sheet. I agree. All right, we're back on Gone Racing. Get to our groups. Welcome back into segment 3 of Gone Racing. Jeff Motley alongside Jeff Parles this week. Brendan is off on vacation, so have Jeff filling in. And Jeff, halfway through the show and you're still alive over there. And
I'm
no tire tracks on your forehead yet.
Doing fine. Hey, look, it's great to be with you guys. Great to be with all the NASCAR fans this week. And it's a fun race going to a track and a city that I love. Nashville. There are not many cities in this country that I love going to more than there, and it's fun to see it on the NASCAR calendar this week.
I like to say I love Nashville. My liver doesn't.
Well, I don't think you're alone in that one, Jeff. I don't think you're alone in that.
Nashville, no question. I'll tell you, outside of Las Vegas is my favorite city. It really is.
I can't really argue with you on that.
There's nothing. There's some cities I really, really like, but Nashville is so high on the list. And so many people are moving there now, and just it's a very, very vibrant area. They call it Nash Vegas, which actually we should take that as a compliment here in Las Vegas. They don't call us Lossville or
Las Nash.
Right.
Nash
See, that doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. So they're Nash Vegas, and so I kind of like that. We don't steal from anybody. They all steal from us. So we should be very happy about that. So, but anyway, should be a great weekend down there in Nashville and down on Lower Broadway and enjoying all the honky tonks and everything else. Now, the racetrack is not real close to downtown Nashville. It's about 35 miles outside the city in a place called Lebanon, Tennessee. But there'll be a lot of stuff going on in Nashville, I'm sure, this weekend around the race. All right, moving along, we're getting to our driver head-to-heads, and we don't go through them one on one. We just kind of tend to pick out some that we really, really like. And,
sure.
Last week we really went the don't line on Kyle Larson. Well, there's at least one really, really big number against Kyle Larson. Tyler Reddick is a plus 140 against Kyle Larson's minus 160. The other ones against Kyle Larson are both plus 110s, Denny Hamlin and William Byron. But the other one that has really, really big number against it is against Ross Chastain, where Chase Briscoe and Joey Logano are both a plus 130 against Ross Chastain. That one I find very intriguing because I know Chastain has run well here, but that's a couple of pretty solid drivers there getting big numbers plus 130 just to beat one guy.
Yeah, it's going to the Larson part of it first. If we're going to take Kyle Larson laying a price, the one I would look at most is Hamlin. That would be the one. Hamlin just in a little bit of a funk after last week. Boy, Byron, I don't want to really go against him after how well he ran last week, even though, again, Larson has been phenomenal at this track. But going to your big dogs that you mentioned as possibilities here, I would prefer Logano over Briscoe. Logano, of course, won here last year, even though Chastain has had a great track record of success. Yeah, that would, of all those big dogs, I think Logano plus 130 is the best one. Also, what are your thoughts about Logano against Chase Elliott? You're getting a plus price with Logano in that one as well.
Well, I think that's the one that I've probably been looking at that I really kind of like here is the Joey Logano plus 110 against Chase Elliott. I think of all the head-to-heads, I probably like that one the most.
Yeah, that's a pretty good price there. And look, there are a ton of head-to-heads available across the betting landscape. You can pick out pretty much everyone, but it seems like of the underdogs on that sheet, Logano at plus 110 feels like the best one. Not really interested in betting Reddick as a dog in either of these matchups this week either.
You need to see a little more out of him at a place like Nashville. And that team struggled a little bit over the last few weeks. So I'm with you there. All right, let's move into our group matchups. We'll start with Group A, where no big surprise here that Kyle Larson, I think there's a surprise here, but it's not with who the favorite is. It's Kyle Larson at plus 240, Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell both at plus 275, and then William Byron at plus 285. I think the surprise to me is that Larson's not plus 210 or plus 215. I think plus 240 on Larson is a really, really good number for a guy who's had so much success at this track. And to be quite honest with you, no one else has been any more consistent lately than William Byron. And here he is a long shot at plus 285. And I think the interesting guy to look at here is Christopher Bell. So in tracks that are a mile and under, Christopher Bell has been the best driver on the circuit this year. At tracks a mile and a half and over, well, Atlanta's a little bit of a different animal because of the way they run.
Sure.
Bell has really struggled on the mile and a half. Now we got a track right between the miles and the mile and a half. So which way is it going to go for Christopher Bell? It's enough to scare me away and say I'm not betting Christopher Bell here.
Well, that makes this a 2-horse race in this Group A for me because of that. What you just said with Bell, it's either all right. Do I again, there's really no such thing as chalk in these group of 4 bets, which is why I like gravitating towards them.
And these are our favorites every week.
And yeah, look, these are the 4 best racers on the circuit at the current moment. But Kyle Larson at plus 240 at a place where he has been, again, him and Chastain have been the 2 best guys at this track since they went back there in 2021. You have to assume a little bit of regression from Byron after, again, he was the best car last week, even though he didn't win. This would be a play on Larson at plus 240. Again, normally don't love chalk, but there's no such thing as chalk at plus 240, right? Except for a golf tournament.
Me, in racing, knowing that you could blow an engine, get a flat tire, getting a wreck, there's no such thing as real chalk anyway. I mean, anything could happen here. All right, let's move along to our Group B, where Ross Chastain comes in as a pretty heavy favorite here at plus 215. Chase Elliott is plus 245. Joey Logano plus 310. And Chase Briscoe at plus 320.
Well, you have last week's winner and last year's champ in this group. So Chastain, like you said, is such a short shot here. This is where I start balking a little bit on when, again, going back to, there's not really eating chalk here because you're getting more than $2 on all these coming back. This feels a little bit light on Chastain at plus 215. Would have expected to be a little bit longer, especially in what is a pretty darn even group across the board. Go look at the defending champion in this race. Again, you brought it up. It was a bizarro race. He had all the restarts. He had 31 extra laps because of the overtimes. But plus 310 on Logano feels like a pretty darn good price to be getting here on a guy who won on this track a year ago. That would be the only look in this group.
Well, I agree with you on that, except other than one race this year, Logano has not been very good this year. They've had one really, really good race this year.
Yeah.
Briscoe seems to be getting better, but I'm not ready to go jump on the Briscoe bandwagon. Chase Elliott is probably the most consistently average driver we've had all year. I mean, he is running top 10 every single week, but he's not been up there challenging for wins. Chastain is the favorite, should be the favorite. I wish there was more juice on it than 215. If we could get him at plus 240, I love Chastain here. Yep. Honestly, this is one of those groups that I probably would say, I'm just not going to touch that group.
Yeah, if it was higher, you could absolutely justify the Chastain for sure on this one, Jeff.
All right, let's take a look at Group C, where Ty Gibbs comes in as our favorite. Josh Berry at plus 255. Josh Berry and Chris Buescher are both plus 260, and Alex Bowman a big plus 300.
I'm going to defer to you on this group because Bowman being the long shot feels like a surprise to me, and it's a pretty darn good price at 3-1, but the other 3 guys are all jam-packed. It's 255, 260, and 260. You got dead even, basically, with those other 3. This is a group I had no idea what to do with, Jeff, so this is deferring to you.
Ty Gibbs is a guy that we keep thinking eventually is going to win a race. Ty Gibbs, it's just hard to figure out where that team's going to be. Josh Berry, that one, throw your hands up in the air. I mean, they've run so well on intermediate tracks this year. They won in Las Vegas, had a great run going at Texas, and he spun out. They've had other runs where they just had a problem. Something's come up. He's gotten a penalty or the crew got a penalty. Buescher, that team got a big boost in their sales by getting 30 of their 60 points that they had been docked by NASCAR back this week on an appeal. This is a very, very tough group for me. But honestly, to me, Josh Berry, they just have been more consistent. They just got to finish stronger. I think getting plus 260 on Josh Berry, I like that number. And I've been a little bullish on Josh Berry, I think, this year, and maybe a little too bullish at times, which has kind of cost me a little bit. But I guess I like Josh Berry a little bit.
There you go. Follow Jeff Motley on this one. This is a complete stay off for Group C.
Let's hope so. At least I have so far been kind of backing up what I've been saying so far with my picks. So we'll look forward to getting into those here a little bit later. All right, let's move along to Group D, where Kyle Busch comes in as our favorite in Group D. He's at plus 255. Actually, we got a big log jam at the top. Kyle Busch, Ryan Preece, and Carson Hocevar are all plus 255. And then Bubba Wallace comes in here at 310. And I mean, now you've got a real interesting situation in this group here, because you've got a real veteran driver there in Kyle Busch at plus 255, who by his own admission has not had the year that he would like to have had. You've got Ryan Preece and Carson Hocevar, who I think we're getting to the point where they're not surprising us by running well because they're doing it every single week. Hocevar has had a little bit more trouble finishing than Preece has. And then you got Bubba Wallace, a guy, this track is made for his driving style, and you get him at plus 310. I personally lean a little bit to Preece because I like what I've seen out of Preece this year. But I think this is a very, very interesting group. And seeing that big 310 by Bubba Wallace's name is somewhat enticing as well.
Going, I mentioned Hocevar's name in every turn, no pun intended, on this show. Back to the well again here on this plus 255. Wallace is the interesting one because you've mentioned him a few times. And yeah, this is a great track for him. And he is the long shot in this group. It's interesting. Neither of us really like Kyle Busch this week, and that's usually when Kyle Busch is at his best, right? When no one's really talking about him. So, but this would be Hocevar for me at plus 255. There is, I mean, again, stacked, compact group yet again with those top three, and then Wallace at that plus 310.
Well, and I think that's probably what makes this group so difficult, is because it is so packed together. Okay, let's take a quick look at Group E, where A.J. Allmendinger is the favorite at plus 260. Noah Gragson, Eric Jones, and Corey Heim coming in here at plus 270. And I know A.J. ran fourth last week at Charlotte, which is probably the reason why he's a favorite here. But I tell you, every week, week in, week out, Noah Gragson gets more and more consistent. I love me some Noah Gragson here in Group E.
Would only be a look at Gragson as well at plus 270. What happened to Corey Heim's photo? Did we lose it in the abyss?
Well, Corey doesn't run full time.
No, I know.
So probably,
just a little bit of a joke more so than anything. But Allmendinger, you know what? I'd love to take Allmendinger, but I'm just so scared of regression after last week finishing the top five. Just the little bit of regression there, and then all of a sudden, again, actually, honestly, everyone but Jones is looking at a little bit of regression this week.
Yep, I like Noah a lot. So, all right, we'll be back, final segment, and give you our picks. Welcome back into the final segment of Gone Racing. Jeff Motley alongside Jeff Parles. Brendan is on vacation this week. The Jeff and Jeff Show.
Yes, sir.
Jeff, you've almost made it through this.
Almost.
Through our fun show here.
One last pit stop. Got to not wreck.
That's
now.
right. That's right. Now we're looking for the final segment and looking for the checkered flag. All right, our final group is the Group F, where Michael McDowell comes in as our favorite at plus 260. Justin Haley, Zane Smith, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. are all plus 270. And boy, I said I didn't like Group B, but I really don't like Group F.
Yeah, it would only be a look at Smith, but again, at some point, some regression's coming. But yeah, you look, the reason all these are compact, they're very similar racers in all these groups. And this is the tightest of all of them. And this is probably the one that you and I will just sit back. And if anyone else wants to bet them, be our guest, but you and I will stay out of it.
Well, I thought it was interesting that you mentioned Zane Smith. You know, Zane has probably been the most consistent out of this group.
Yeah.
He's also the younger guy in this group. Now, Justin Haley's not old by any stretch, but Michael McDowell and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. both been around for quite some time, and a couple of veterans that you just never know with those guys. I mean, Michael McDowell was running so well at Texas. He had a chance to win at Texas. So, like, where did that come from? So, this to me is it's the tough group because I do like Zane Smith a little bit. If you said, okay, you've got to pick somebody, I like Zane Smith in this group. But boy, I can make a case for everybody here. So we'll not be picking that group. I think I'm going to stay completely away from that one. So, all right, let's take a look at our odds to win from the manufacturer standpoint. They almost are identical, I believe, to the numbers that we had last week at Charlotte. Maybe Ford's is a little higher, but Chevy's a plus 120, Toyota's a plus 150, and Ford, who happens to have the guy who won this race last year, is coming in at a plus 300. Is that enough? Would that be enough juice to entice you to want to take Ford at plus 300?
Nah, again, I don't think Logano is going to win for a second straight year. He might have a high finish, but I don't think he's going to win again. I mean, just look at the cars they're getting in the Chevrolet, and we've talked about it. Like you got yourself Larson, who has been unbelievable at this course and has been the best guy on the circuit so far this year, and you get Chastain too. So a plus 120 on Chevrolet feels like the best bet of all these so far.
Yeah, and I know there's a number of different drivers that are out there in Fords, but let's think about this. Ryan Blaney is a plus 800 to win. Joey Logano is 25-1 to win. Why do you want to take a plus 300 on the manufacturer when you could go out there and maybe even if you wanted to take Josh Berry or Chris Buescher, the numbers are so much higher.
Take a shot on Priest even, yeah.
Yeah, even Priest. So 300 is the biggest number out there, but I just don't think it's even as Brendan likes to say, I don't think that the juice is worth the squeeze.
Well, I mean, the thing, and also too, like, and this is the case every week, but you're getting Larson, Byron, and Chastain together in that plus 120. That's just a hard trio to pass up.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. All right, let's take a quick look at our championship odds. We have not seen a lot of movement. Ross Chastain, he did improve a little bit by getting a win. He went from about a 30-1 last week up to a 20-1. But the ones at the top, I mean, look, I think everybody still feels like right now this is a Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell battle. We'll see who else decides they want to join it. But right now, when it comes to picking guys for the championship, I think Ross Chastain, this is probably the best number you're going to get on him the rest of the way at 20-1. I'd be surprised to see that go any higher. Probably if I looked at anybody and I said, hey, you're going to try to just throw caution to the wind on a bigger number out there, maybe it's Chase Briscoe at 30-1. I also think these numbers probably will change a little bit because these odds probably were done a day or so ago before Chris Buescher got 30 points back, and now he's only 6 points out of being in playoff contention as opposed to 36 points out of playoff contention. So I think that's going to be a big difference there because he's right now at 50-1. So probably Chris Buescher, Chase Briscoe, if you're looking for some long shots. But right now, even Ross Chastain at 20-1, maybe a little bit of value there.
It really would be hard pressed to see someone other than Larson, Bell, or Byron winning the championship more likely than not. Byron,
and Denny Hamlin's never won a championship, and you wonder at some point,
does he bust through?
Do they put it together? You know, and one thing we've been talking about Denny Hamlin, we have hardly even mentioned Denny Hamlin's name on the show today. And Brendan and I talked last week about how the one thing that Denny Hamlin's team had seemed to have overcome this year were shortfalls shortfalls, whatever you want to call them, on pit road. And that's exactly what happened to him in the Coca-Cola 600. They did not properly get the car fueled, and he had to come in and make a late pit stop for fuel when none of the other cars did, and it put him a lap down. He did end up unlapping himself, but it really cost him any shot at the win because it looked like he was a guy who really was able to contend with Byron and then later on with Chastain right there at the end. So they're going to have to overcome those if they want to win a championship. Well, speaking of last week, if Brendan was here, it'd be a little bit more fun to pat myself on the back because let me tell you, the number of rotator cuff injuries he should have from patting himself on the back. And I really, really hope he goes back and listens to the show to see that we're picking on him while he's not here, because it's more fun to pick on him when he is here, but it's still fun to pick on him even when he's not here. But it was a good week last week. He and I actually both had really good weeks, but I did feel like I took the don't line on Kyle Larson last week, and William Byron, Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell all came through with me on the don't line, and then went with Chase Briscoe in Group D, and finishing third in the race, came in with the win in Group D. So a big plus 9.2 units last week for me. And Brendan, I've got to give him his due. He and I were both on the same page when it came to the betting against Larson last week. So he had the Byron and the Bell, and then he and I also agreed on Chase Briscoe winning in his group. That was a big win for us to get Chase Briscoe there. Pit crew, a little bit tougher week last week, but they did get an anti-Larson pick. They did have Byron over Larson to give the pit crew a pick, and our standings now for the season. No, we have no graphic for the standings this week. So anyway, needless to say, I have a big lead. Brendan's in second.
That's good.
And the pit crew has a little bit of work to do. So, and with that, it's time to start making our picks for this week. And Jeff, you're going to make picks as well, but we'll get through our regular picks, and we'll clear the dance floor.
Oh, that's a scary sign for everyone dance involved,
floor for Motley. You. So we do go worst to first here. So the first picks are the pit crew picks. They're going with a couple of head-to-heads here where they're taking Chase Elliott over Ross Chastain and Joey Logano over Ross Chastain. So they're going to buy into the Ross Chastain don't line, if you will. They're also taking Alex Bowman in Group C, Zane Smith, who we talked about a little earlier, in Group F, and definitely going against my advice, and they are taking Ford to win at plus 300, looking to get a big number there. Brendan, even though he is out blowing bubbles under the water somewhere, did send in his picks. He is doing something he does not do very often. He is picking a race winner.
Ooh.
He is taking Kyle Larson at plus 500 to win. Then he has two of his head-to-heads here. He has Tyler Reddick over Christopher Bell at plus 130 and Chase Briscoe over Ross Chastain at plus 130. And then he has two group picks. He's taking Noah Gragson in Group E. And he also, like the pit crew, is sticking into the Zane Smith in Group F. So we'll see how those work out. Now,
all right.
Now,
a lot of plus money.
Now, well, and you know, when head-to-heads, we typically go plus money. It's like if you're going to pick head-to-heads and you only got to beat one guy, take the guy that's got some good odds. You know, it just doesn't make sense to take Kyle Larson at minus 160 over a William Byron or something like that, because it's just, in talking about the juice not being worth the squeeze, the juice is definitely not worth the squeeze there. All right, my picks this week, I am going to go with one head-to-head, and that is Joey Logano over Chase Elliott. And the remainder of my picks are all in the groups. I am taking Kyle Larson in Group A at plus 240. And if I can figure out where my sheets are, since, you know, we're professionally unprofessional, you know, that's what Brendan and I like to say. I am going into Group C, where I'm going to take Josh Berry at plus 260. Group D, I struggled with this one between Ryan Preece and Carson Hocevar, and I ended up going with Carson Hocevar in Group D. And I also like our hometown kid, Noah Gragson, in Group E at a plus 270.
There we go.
With that, Mr. Parles,
you're giving me too much of the floor. So
you have plenty of time now to tell us who your five picks are.
So I have four. I have four for this week, but I can add a fifth if you really want me to, because it's Kyle Larson.
Well, it's kind of like cheating if you don't take five. Well, we all take five,
I'll add a fifth to the end. Because it's all Kyle Larson all the time this week for me. I am going to lay $1.30 against Hamlin. I know that you guys love doing the plus price, but I'll lay the $1.30 with Larson against Hamlin. Just expect that to be the case yet again with another.
You're picking Larson. You're picking Hamlin.
Picking Larson.
Picking Larson.
Picking Larson minus 130.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm laying a price. I look, value is value. I gotta go with it. Taking Larson Group A at plus 240. Again, he has been unbelievable at this track. The week is so much more normal for him this week that I expect him to have a great shot of winning this race like he did in 2021. We talked about Hocevar before. You're on him in Group D. I'm on him as well at plus 255. Super unlucky, really the entire year, more so, even just including the last week. He's been super unlucky, like him at plus 255 in that group. Then I'll take Chevrolet at plus 120. Just again, you're giving me Larson, Byron, and Chastain. Feel pretty darn good about one of those three, and I still got extra outs after those three anyway. And then you know what? I'll take Kyle Larson as well to win the race. I'll follow Brendan Gone. We'll take him at around 5-1. That'll be the fifth pick. We'll just take Larson to win this thing outright. We're going for extra money here.
Well, I can see that,
well.
and you know, there was a couple weeks ago the pit crew took Joey Logano in 4 different picks, and they lost all 4 of them.
Well, you know what? It's all or nothing, right?
But they did get a pick right that week. The one that they did not take Joey Logano. And
here's the thing, though. I can win Chevrolet without Kyle Larson, and Hocevar wins that group. I'm ahead for the week, regardless. Even if Larson has a bad week in Nashville.
Well, we will make sure next week when we come back on Gone Racing, we tell everyone how you did. So that wraps it up.
Is that a threat or is that a?
That's a promise and a threat. But we'll be back next week. Brendan should be back. Jeff, thank you for sitting in.
Welcome.
Next week we'll wrap up Nashville and start talking all things Michigan. See you next week on Gone Racing.